Chapter 9 really got into especially skeletal muscle, taking a deep look at how skeletal muscle is built on a molecular level and how it works. Chapter 10 is a little easier when it comes to physiology, but we will be taking a look at the anatomy in terms of individual muscles. First, we will look at how muscles interact with each other. Next, we'll look at how skeletal muscles are named, their fascicle arrangements. We don't get into lever systems, but this should all set you up for taking a look at learning all of the muscles. Now, before we get into the details on this slide, make sure that you are able to define agonist, antagonist, synergist, and fixator relative to the skeletal muscles. If you recall, back in chapter 9, we talked about how an entire muscle organ is made up of fascicles. Well, when we take a closer look at various muscles, we realize that those fascicles can be arranged in a variety of patterns. This slide shows you the variety of patterns, with the circular that we see in orbicularis oris as well as orbicularis oculi. Convergent, this is one we see where the fascicles end up converging to one spot, usually on the insertion. Parallel, our sartorius, is a really good example of how all of the fascicles are parallel to each other. And then pinnate, the root word pinna means feather. And I think that especially if you see unipinnate, you can imagine that being a bird feather. But we also have bipinnate, where the fibers are coming off of a tendon in this pattern. And then the deltoid muscle, which is part of your shoulder girdle, shoulder structure, is multipinnate. Some of the heads of the deltoid you see appear to be bipinnate, others are unipinnate, so that makes it multipinnate. You will need to remember a number of muscles for lab. Not every single one that you see on this slide or the next one is on your list to remember for lab, but a number of them are. And so, how can you remember them better? Well, let's take a look at how muscles are named. Muscles can be named for their location. Can you look at this illustration and find one or two? Well, femoris, located near the femur. There's one right there. Pectoralis, located at this part of the chest. We can name muscles based on their shape. You're going to have to remember your geometry a little bit to get these. Trapezius, deltoid. These are examples of shapes. And then you will also see rhomboids on the next slide, looking at the posterior surface of the body. Another way to name muscles is according to the direction in which their fascicles run. So fascicle direction. What is an example of that? Can you find one on this? How about external oblique, internal oblique? We can name muscles according to where they are attached. So they're attachments. My favorite one, I think, is a really cool name because it takes you through all three of the attachments. Sternocleidomastoid, the sternum, the clavicle, and the mastoid process. Looking at the posterior aspect of the body and the muscles here, we can see that we can name muscles based on their size. Again, can you find one? I can find two of them right here, medius, maximus. We can also name muscles based on the number of origins. And so some muscles have two origins. In other words, where they attach to the bone that isn't moved by the muscle. Here we see the biceps femoris. It has two heads. We can also see the triceps brachii on the back of the arm. If we were to look at the front of the arm, we would see the bicep brachii. We also name muscles based on their action. Again, take a look here. Do you see any that would be named based on their action? I see a number: levitator scapula, flexor, extensor, etc. So that's all I have to say for the lecture part of this chapter. Again, how do muscles interact? We're looking at agonist, antagonist, synergist, and fixators. How are muscles named? Sometimes they are named for their fascicle arrangement, sometimes their size, etc. Sometimes for their action. So make sure you're clear on that. And in this class, we are not going into the lever systems. So you see in your chapter a lot of pages that deal with the origin, insertion, and action of important skeletal muscles. This is your lab information. This is your lab information. So please note on your lab list of muscles, only a few of them ask you to know the origin, insertion, and action. You don't have to know those for everyone, only a few.